Unstoppable kick-ass confidence. Are you ready?
Welcome to the Raw and Unscripted Show with Christopher Rausch, where we help you overcome your self-created crap without the self-help fluffy bullshit. Now please welcome our host, Christopher Rausch.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to another episode of the Raw and Unscripted Show with yours truly, the No Excuses Coach, Christopher Rausch. I am pleased and honored to be here with you tonight, whether you're watching live on the video cast or listening, of course, on the audio podcast in any one of 100 plus countries. So thank you very much for that. But every single Tuesday night, if you're new to this, every single Tuesday night, we do this live on videocast on YouTube, youtube.com/the Christopher Rausch, RAUSCH. You can go to rawandunscripted.com also and find that. But we're live and we always take your questions. We take your engagement because this is a conversation with you. I pride myself on having these conversations with you guys every single week. And it's sort of like class. You show up and you listen to either myself and a guest, and you take three opportunities for your growth, for your advancement, and you go work on those for the next 7 days, and then you show up for the next episode and you come back here. And when you start to realize that there's value in the things and the actions that we prescribe here, then you have an opportunity to work with me one-on-one as a coach, or also in my group coaching program to further your growth and further the opportunities for you guys to leave an amazing legacy and essentially ditch your excuses in favor of results, and doing it the authentic way, doing it on your terms, not what anybody else wants for you or what anybody else has said you should do. This is about finding who you truly are at your core and being able to rock your life so that when your time is come to move on to the next journey, you can look back on your life and you can be proud of the legacy of the impact and of the accomplishments that you experienced, that you personally worked hard for. And a lot of you guys out there are playing the someday game. And I hear it every single day. You know, Chris, I'll be happy when I have the relationships. I'll be happy when I have the car. I'll be happy when I can buy a house. I'll be happy when my son gets his shit together, whatever it might be. And I encourage you, and this is what life is about, is really to experience and be present in the moments and push yourself outside your comfort zone and decide for yourself today that when I take that action, when I take that 1% imperfect action every single day and you build upon itself, you start to realize that it is easier than you thought it was going to be. And so many people come back to me after working with me or having experiences listening to the show for quite some time. And they're like, Chris, I wish I would have done it sooner. And let me be perfectly clear with you guys. There will come a day where you're going to die and you're going to look back on your life, whether you have a long drawn out death or you die suddenly. There is going to be that window where you're going to be able to sit there and say, fuck, I crushed it. Man, I'm leaving behind an awesome legacy for my family to follow. I've done what I need to do here, and now I'm excited for that next journey. And that's how I live my life. I'm scared to death of death. It's not something that I advocate, but at the same time, every single day I use that as leverage to say, did I use my words and my actions today to leave the world a better place for who I am and what I did? Have I been present and playful with my son? Have I fulfilled my promises to myself? Because if you get nothing else out of this episode tonight, when you keep your promises to yourself and you do the things you say you're going to do, you're going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to the gym. You're going to start eating healthier. You're going to focus on your relationships. You're going to stop tolerating people that drain your soul. You keep those promises to yourself. Guess what? All of that builds upon itself and you start to feel a little bit better. You start to do a little bit better. You start to realize, you know what else in my life have I been putting off that I've been waiting for this someday to be happy? I invite you today to choose and decide that you're worthy enough, number one, to be happy and to celebrate the successes in your life and to celebrate what you do have. Because I talked about this last week on the show, when you look around and you focus on things that you don't have, you will find more of that. And if you focus on what's wrong, you will find more of that. It's called a reticular activation system in your brain. If I tell you to look around your room and tell me everything that's blue, you're going to go blue, 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 blue. I'm pointing at things that are blue. And you're going to go, Chris, I got everything that's blue. I got it. And I sit there and I tell you, okay, cool. Tell me what was yellow. You'd be like, Chris, you were telling me to look at what was blue. I was looking at what was blue. Yeah. Right? Same thing happens in life. If you wake up every single day and you set the intention for who you're going to be, how you're going to show up, and the legacy that you get to leave, and you focus on the keeping your promises to yourself, and you set some intentions, like my intention is to be present and playful with my son. My intention is to use my words and my actions to make the world a better place, et cetera, et cetera. And you focus on those things and you focus on gratitude. Like, fuck, I'm grateful for the breath I get to breathe. I'm thankful for the things I get to smell. I was just talking with a client yesterday about grounding and about how to become present in the moment. Like, what do I get to smell right now? Hopefully it's not cat shit, but you know what I'm saying? So when you get present with yourself and you find the things to be grateful for, I'm grateful for the dry erase board. I'm grateful for the big screen TV. I'm grateful for the fan. I'm grateful for the guests I'm about to introduce. Holy shit, there's so much life that we take for granted. So please stop taking life for granted. And if this speaks to you and you're listening to this show and you want to experience coaching with me, you can. You just need to reach out. info@noexcusescoach.com. You can send me an email. You can tell me how you like the show. You can tell me what you'd like to see in the show if you're a longtime listener, whatever it might be. info@noexcusescoach.com. I'd love to hear from you guys. I got some great emails last week about our show, which was with Caroline Boyd. Holy shit. If you missed that show, go back and listen to it, because Caroline's story was one that I had a hard time keeping up with. It is a story of resiliency. It's a story of taking your power back. It's a story of not giving up. It's a story. It's an amazing story of bravery in the eye of what could put a lot of people in the ground. So I encourage you to go back and listen to that. Another episode that we're getting a lot of feedback on is the one previous to that, which was 10 of life's surprises. So I went in there and I talked about the things that often come up in life that we're not prepared for, and getting a lot of people from all over the world, especially China, funny enough, saying, hey man, thank you for bringing that up. People have told me, I've had more people tell me they've gotten a fireproof safe for their special documents than probably anything. That and also their will, and having the conversation with their spouse about advanced medical care, because I had a friend recently who got a brain tumor and her life changed overnight. I've told the story a few times here on the show. Won't bore you with it again, but life has a way of changing like that. So you need to have these conversations. So go back and listen to those 2 episodes. And of course, engage with us tonight on this particular episode, because we're going to be talking about, again, life. I have a special guest who's been in the trenches of the coaching world for over a decade, talking to coaches, building businesses, and seeing what actually works and what's complete garbage. Marc Mawhinney has been in the game since 2014, building a long-running podcast of 900 plus episodes, focusing heavily on helping coaches actually get clients. So please help me in welcoming to the Raw and Unscripted show, Marc Mawhinney from Natural Born Coaches. What's up, Marc Mawhinney?
Hey, how are you doing, Christopher?
I'm doing fantastic, in case you can't tell.
Yeah, this I don't know how many times we've done this, either you on my show or vice versa. So, and you're coming back on my show too. So it's time flies though. It does,
dude. We've known each other for a long, long time, and you're one of the few people in the coaching industry, which we were just talking about before we went on camera. The coaching industry that I respect. You're real, you're truthful, you say it how it is, you care about people, you care about people's successes. You're not landing in your ego all the time. You're confident without being arrogant. So I have a lot of respect for you, and I'm glad we get to have you back on here in the show.
Well, thank you.
Based on what I said in the intro, talking about life, talking about the premise of what it is we're talking about on Raw and Unscripted, about the ability to change the direction of our life when we make that choice and make that promise to ourselves. What do you want people listening and watching tonight? What do you want them to walk away knowing in their heart of hearts that can help them change whatever situation that they're feeling at this present moment?
Well, I mean, you made a lot of good points in the intro when I was listening along. One thing I would say for people is humans by just default, our thinking tends to go negative, right? What's the stat I've heard? We have 60,000 thoughts a day, and I'm guessing 90% are negative and the other 10% are probably neutral, but they're not great. So I encourage people to flip their thinking around. And I know it's kind of corny and cliche, the whole glass being half full versus half empty type thing that you've heard. But really, when you start to look for the good that's in your life, you're like, oh, wow, wait a minute, I have a lot of good stuff going on. In these days with social media, it's easy to not think that, because you're looking at all these people posting these huge wins, and they're usually full of, you know what, like eight-figure years, and everything goes perfect all the time and stuff. But I'd say to someone, if you look at the actual numbers, it's almost impossible to not succeed. If you're working hard every day, you're showing up like you talked about, that's 365 days a year. That's over 3,600 days in a decade, and then on over 7,000. So you're going to get so many opportunities and quote lucky breaks just from showing up every day. again, it's near impossible not to achieve success with that many kicks at the can out there.
It's true. It's true. It really is about that compound interest. I tell people that all the time, like taking that imperfect action every single day will win you those results. It starts to build on itself. Wow, I did things for 7 days in a row. Can you do something for 7 days in a row? Absolutely. I did it for 7 days in a row. Can I do it for 14 days in a row? Can I make a promise to myself that in 6 months I will achieve X result? And can I list out the 3 main steps that I have to do to accomplish that? And you just start building that process out, and you start taking those steps, and you start building the momentum, and you start to realize it wasn't as hard as we make it out to believe in our mind. Mark, based on that, what are people's biggest excuses for why they're not happy and successful?
Well, it could be any number of external things. It takes a lot to actually take responsibility yourself. So nowadays we're hearing the economy sucks. You know, it could be tariffs, war, whatever. AI, that's another one that people are handing off their as an excuse, or they're using AI, especially I'm seeing in the coaching world in the online space. Politicians, government policy, the weather. Well, a good example is during COVID. I'm not trying to minimize. Who would have seen that coming? Lockdowns, it was a kind of a once in 100-year thing. Yeah. But the people who've bounced back from it are the ones that didn't stay focused on, oh, gee, if this hadn't happened, I'd be here now, or whatever. They just keep showing up every day. And what we also don't realize is maybe it was we were meant to pivot. So for example, I've probably told this story on your past shows, but my background, my past lives in real estate, where the first 10 years out of university, I built up a real estate business and everything was going great. Hockey stick growth, because I'm in Canada, I have to say hockey stick, until the shit hit the fan, everything collapsed. Looking back now, having the benefit of hindsight many years later, I could think, well, maybe I wasn't meant to be doing that. That was the first thing I really did in my adult life, and not to knock it. Some people love doing it, but now I'm like, you know what? I actually can see why that wasn't the right fit for me with what I'm doing now. So just remember, some things are happening to you, or they may not seem positive now, but you could look back and think, oh, thank God that happened.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's so funny. You said the word pivot. In my brain, I thought, the people that I know that went through the experience of COVID, the difference between the people who came out as successful and the people who didn't were the people who pivoted. I know so many people in the speaking world who said, like, overnight, all of their speaking gigs got canceled, and that's their primary only source of income. And I know people that went back to their day job and just said, oh, I can't do it anymore. And I know a lot of people that says, okay, we've got this thing called Zoom. Let me figure out this technology. Let me start marketing to businesses and saying, hey, you got a bunch of people at home. Let me speak to them. And those individuals wound up quadrupling their business. Not only were they able to do the online space and be able to do Zooms, but once everything lifted, they were highly in demand to be seen in person, because they were there to serve and to pivot and to teach people how you don't stay stuck when things change. Because the only constant in life is change. My question to you is, why do people choose to be a victim of their own narrative? Because I find that it's the people that are able to sit there and say, okay, wow, life is happening for me. Everything that has happened in my life up until this point has prepared me for what's next. And the difference is the other people is life is happening to me. Why does this keep happening to me? So what do you think that difference is, based on your experience in the coaching industry and the profession, and also your own pivots?
Well, it's probably because it's a lot easier to have a victim mentality, right? To blame someone else. It probably starts when we're kids. When you're 4 years old and somebody spills chocolate milk in kindergarten, and your first instinct's to blame Susie or Johnny. It wasn't me. Yeah. It's hard to accept blame. And, full disclosure for myself, with my business closure, I probably looked at different things to blame, like the local economy. We had a bunch of energy projects that had been planned when we made a big expansion, then they all got canceled and so on. But at the end of the day, it was I made the decisions that I made, and ultimately I grew too big too fast with it, and I have to accept responsibility for that. It'd be very easy to blame others. One thing I'll mention, just to circle back on what you said about pivoting, I love it during COVID. I'm not sure if you've had Bob Berg on your show,
yep.
Co-op. Yeah. So
go
Yeah, doesn't know
Yep.
he co-authored The Go-Giver. He wrote Endless Referrals and so on.
Yep.
He's been on my show a few times, and he was telling me that when COVID hit, he's in Florida, and he's like, well, I'm not going to be traveling, so I'm just going to have to do the virtual thing or whatever. And he loved it so much, he doesn't travel anymore for speaking gigs. I think he was on the road 300 and some days a year. He was just living in airports and stuff, and now he gets to enjoy his beautiful home in Florida and be working there. So there's a good example of a pivot with it. Bob didn't say, oh, gee, this sucks, woe is me, and blah, blah, blah. He said, no, I'll change with it and just make that pivot he had to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. It's about being a part of the solution, not part of the problem. And the thing that I think of when we look at why people are victims and why people blame is the fact of who it is that they associate with. Because I know personally for me, when I was the smartest person in the room, sure, it felt great. But once I got into a room in 2013 around people who were brighter and smarter than me doing the things that I wanted to do, I suddenly didn't have any more excuses. I had inspiration. I didn't have that negative self-talk of saying, well, how am I going to do it and why me? I just looked around and went, wow, that person had nothing and they've achieved what I want to achieve. That person had that person. Okay, what's the difference between them and what I am currently experiencing? And I found it to be the way that we speak to ourselves. Right? Do we use affirming, powerful language, not to float our own boat, but do we do that? Do we associate with people who inspire us or people who love the misery and love to bitch, piss, and moan? Because I know in the people that I've coached, when I've asked them to take a look at the 5 people they're around the most, and do they push you? Do they promote you? Do they challenge you? Or are they people that you tolerate? And when people come back to me and go, Chris, I didn't realize, from all these people that I was tolerating it and that I was trying to be there for them. I'm like, okay, your goal for the next 3 months is to get around 4 or 5 people that inspire you, that hold you accountable, that you enjoy being with, that don't drain your energy. And it's pretty amazing how fast that decision alone changes the trajectory of what it is that they're doing. What's your advice on that negative self-talk? How can you, because I know a lot of people are telling me right now, Chris, I'm overwhelmed. Chris, I'm tired. Chris, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, keep telling yourself that, and you're going to continue to bury yourself in your own dirt. So what are some suggestions that you have for people to shift that narrative if perhaps they've always been in that victim mindset their entire life?
You made a really good point about who you associate with, because I don't think people realize how powerful that is and what kind of influence it has. Yeah. One of my favorite stories, Jim Rohn talked about a guy who left his previous job and got a new one, and he was very happy, very positive. He was all good to go, except he realized that every Wednesday night he was in a crappy mood, and he couldn't realize why. And he got looking at his calendar, journal, seeing what's going on here on Wednesdays. And he had kept a standing lunch appointment with employees at his old work every Wednesday. They would get together. Of course, they're still bitching and complaining, and that was just leeching onto him, and he didn't even realize it. And that, oh, gee, that's why I'm in a crummy mood on Wednesday night. What kind of advice would I give to people is I just say, don't be so hard on yourself. And again, I think social media and our current landscape environment, it makes it very difficult to not put pressure on ourselves, because what's the Steve Furtick quote about seeing everybody's behind the scene or everyone else's highlight reels while we're seeing our behind the scenes. And it is easy to make it look, oh my gosh, like look at these influencers on Instagram with millions of followers traveling to all these beautiful exotic places. And you think, wow, like what a life. You're not seeing all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. I can say this on your show. I wouldn't say it on others. There's a term called Dubai porta potty, and it's a number of influencers will go, they get hired by very rich men in the Middle East who have tons of oil money, and they get paid to have certain things, porta potty, you could probably infer, what I'm talking about. Right. So when I see some of those pictures, not saying all Instagram influencers are Dubai porta potties, but some are, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's not the glamorous life that you're seeing on the on Instagram or TikTok or whatever.
It's so true, Mark. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about this, what you said before, and I was going to bring it up a little bit later, but comparison is the enemy of success. And so oftentimes I see so many people, and I do it too. I laugh with my wife. I'm like, we'll be having a tough situation, but we'll be out somewhere. I'm like, okay, let's do a selfie. And we'll be like, and then we go back to being like, all right, what are we going to do now? And it's there, oh my God, Chris, your life is so amazing. You're always so happy. And I'm like, don't compare what you see in a nanosecond to what's going on in your life. Because again, like you just said, Mark, so perfectly, you don't know what's going on. And I wish everybody, when the sound of my voice, could experience success and fame and money and all those different things, to find out. Somebody just said, Chris Williamson said, I only follow 2 podcasts now, Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom, and Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. And Chris Williamson said, he goes, you have to win the game to realize the game isn't what it is that's going to bring you that happiness and that success. But so often we're using the barometer of what we're seeing everybody else doing. And it's pretty ridiculous, because I know from personal experience, I've coached millionaires, not a billionaire yet, I don't think, but plenty of millionaires, entrepreneurs, CEOs, CFOs, actors, actresses, musicians. And you look on the surface, you look at their Instagram, you look at their life, and you're like, Jesus Christ, 20,000 people paid to see you in concert recently. Yet you have imposter syndrome that fucking marvels anything that I've experienced, feeling an imposter syndrome. But you have the valid evidence, the proof that people buy your records or see your movies. And yet these people are still struggling with that. It's pretty incredible when you sit there and you realize, I'm just going to compare myself to the version I was yesterday. And that's what I always talk about. Like, how can I be just a little bit better than I was yesterday? How can I just keep one more promise? How can I just push myself outside the comfort zone? And one of the things I tell people that I use in my own personal experience is, when I'm doing stuff, if I'm half-assing it, I sit there and ask myself, Chris, is this really your best? Because so oftentimes we're saying, I'm doing the best I can. And I'll tell people, like, you're full of shit. You're not doing the best you can. Because I guarantee if somebody put a fucking gun to your kid's head and said, I would need you to do your best right now, your best would become 100 times more than it is right now. Would it not? And everybody's like, well, yeah, you bring up a good point. But how do I get myself to do that? I'm like, you raise your standards. You raise your standards. I have all my coaching exercise. All my coaching people do a values exercise, because I'm like, what is it? What are your top 5 values? And are you being congruent with those values? And so it really is about what you're saying, in the fact that we're comparing ourselves to everybody else. And people say that about me. They're like, Chris, you're so energetic and you're always so positive. I'm like, you see me for an hour on a podcast, or you see a 60-second video, but I go through depression. I go through periods of self-doubt. I sometimes wake up and don't feel like getting out of bed, but guess what? I've just figured out what the steps are, the tools are in my toolbox to fix that situation, so that I can change the narrative going on in my brain. What is one of your experiences, Mark, in your life where you've been at your lowest? And talk to us about what that felt like, and what were some of the things that you did to turn that around, and how you've prevented that from happening again.
Well, with the closure of the real estate business, it was August of 2009, and horrible time. I don't know if there's ever a good business closure, but sometimes you see people who were, at the time I was only 30 years old or so. I just turned 31. So I know why they call them the dirty 30s. That was the start of my 30s. So it wasn't like 65 getting ready for retirement and orderly transfer selling the business. It was the opposite. And I remember in the days following that I had bought a Think and Grow Rich workbook, which was based on, of course, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, that you go through and do the exercises. And my wife, ex-wife now, we still co-parent fine and everything else, but we were married at the time. And she said, she goes, this probably isn't the right time to be buying books and other things. We've just gone through this. And I said, actually, this is the exact time I need to be buying this. I said, I need to keep my head in the right space, be doing personal development, keep that vibe up, the mood as much as I can. And I said, push comes to shove, I will put mustard on the pages and I will eat them to survive. It'll be food. So if that makes you feel any better, I'm happy to report I didn't have to eat the pages from the Think and Grow Rich workbook. But you need to surround yourself with as much positive stuff as you possibly can in that time, because if not, you're just going to get consumed by whatever tornado is going on around you. So I would just say submerge yourself in whatever motivates you. The other thing too, I feel like in the personal development space, people are motivated by different things. So for example, my brother loves, he's been listening to Neville Goddard and some of these old timey guys, right? They have like the recordings of them, which I've listened to, Earl Nightingale or so on. that doesn't always fire me up as much as some other stuff. So don't take what it motivates other people. Some people get motivated, could be church. Maybe that doesn't do it for other people, or so on. And I always say, because people hear personal development, like, oh yeah, it's going to be the lovey-dovey, woo-woo, love your neighbor, whatever. In certain cases, anger can be used in a positive way, as long as you're not consumed by it. So for me, what got me out of bed was thinking of my haters standing around the bed saying, oh yeah, look at him, that bum, like he's not going to make a comeback or whatever. And I always say, it's like, I'm a Star Wars fan, or at least the original trilogy, not so much now. But Luke Skywalker, if anyone who's watched it in Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader and the Emperor trying to goad him to give into this dark side, right, and everything else, and Luke isn't having it. But then Darth Vader mentions something about his sister Leia, basically that he'll work with her and bring her to the dark side. And Luke just flips out, he's able to chop off Vader's hand. He gets the upper hand, pun intended. Well, he took anger and used it in a positive way. So I do think anger can be used as long as it's used the right way, and you don't become bitter and angry all the time and consumed by it.
It's true. It's really what you're talking about is becoming resourceful. And I find that so many people self-sabotage themselves in convincing themselves that they're not resourceful people. And it's pretty incredible when you give somebody a situation that might be completely insane, but you give them the situation, it's incredible how fast that they will find a resolution to that make-believe situation. Because I've done that with so many people. People have come to me and they said, okay, Chris, I want to coach with you. And I tell them what it is. And they're like, oh, Chris, I can't afford that. I don't have the money. If I had that kind of money, then I would do this, or, just whatever the excuse might be, or the self-limiting belief that they have established within themselves. And so I go to the extremes with people. I go to the dark side. Like I talked about death in the beginning of the show. People, why do you have to talk about death so much? I'm like, because it's a fucking huge piece of leverage in my life. We're all going to die. We're not going to live forever. I've known people who were here one day and gone the next for no apparent reason. They were healthy. They were everything. They were happy, and they were gone. So that's the leverage in my life. And so I used this on a woman one time. She was being very obstinate and very argumentative with me. And I figured I have nothing to lose. And so I reached out to her through this conversation we were having. This is probably about, Jesus, you talking about COVID. It was before COVID. And so I just took a chance and I said, who is the person that you love the most in your life? And she said, my son. And I said, what's your son's name? And she says, Nathan. I said, how old is Nathan? It's funny enough, at the time he was 9. And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, because I always like to measure things, on a scale of 1 to 10, you can't pick 7. What would you do for Nathan to protect him, to provide livelihood for him, and to keep him happy? And the lady says 10. And I said, okay. I said, I'm going to go dark for a second. I said, you come home tomorrow afternoon, you come home from work, you walk in the door, Nathan is sitting in a chair, and there's a person standing next to him with a 9mm pistol pointed at his temple. I said, and that person sits there and says to you, hey lady, in the next 7 days, you need to come up with $10,000, and it can't be illegal, immoral, or unethical. Otherwise, I'm going to pull the trigger and your son's going to be dead. I said, what do you do in that situation? And her immediate response, without even batting an eyelash, she didn't even blink. She said, I would figure it out. And I said, what would you do? And she started naming out things. I would sell things. I would ask for money. I would, do this and that. I can remember all the different things that she did, but she got panicky. And I said, you became resourceful in that moment. I said, there's no other reason that you can't achieve something in your life except for the negative self-belief that you have in yourself that you can't, right? Because so many people do that. In your experience in working with coaches and being a coach and seeing people go through the ups and downs of life, what are some other ways that people self-sabotage their success?
I think there's a lot of coaches who there's obviously a fear of failure everybody has, but just as powerful is fear of success, because they start to get to that breakthrough point. And then, well, here's a perfect example. Let's say they're scrolling Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and they see an ad from a big name guru, and then they click on the comments for the ads. Anyone who's done that on Facebook, half the ads are like scam, they're just negative stuff running it down. So the person then thinks, subconsciously at least, is why would I want to become successful like this person? Because look at all the attacks that they're facing. I don't want to be dealing with strangers on the internet calling me every name in the book and the comments there. And then they sort of take the foot off the gas a little bit and play safe, and they stay where they're at. I remember I was talking with someone before who, it was actually, it was my ex-wife. When she was in high school, she worked at a grocery store at the checkout, ringing people through. This was before all the grocery stores try to get people to do self-checkout, not have to pay people. Right. But anyways, she used to be like the best person at it, super fast, bang, 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 was really good. And then she realized really quickly she was getting paid the same amount as the lazy person at the checkout next to her, the employee that was going at half the speed. So she's thinking, well, why am I busting my butt here, and both getting paid the same amount with it? It's also, what is it, Parkinson's law, that talking about the amount of time that's available to complete something and how stuff will expand to that match that time with it. So there's another example of self-sabotage in action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. It's pretty amazing how people continue to shoot themselves in the foot over and over again, and wondering why they're in the same place they were 10 years ago. And you talked about that aspect of fear. And I have found that people's fears are often unjustified, that they're often stories they've built in their head, or their fears that they've carried over from their parents. Because I know you know this, but a lot of people listening find this fascinating, that most of the time we become the people that we're going to become between the age of 0 and 7 years old, 5, 6, 7 years old. And a lot of that stuff that we carry over with us is the belief and the feelings and emotions that our parents embodied, because we think that's normal. We think that's the thing to do. Oh, anxiety about money is what we do. And I ask people, what would it be like if you didn't have that fear anymore? Like, what would it be like if you didn't have a fear of public speaking? How would it feel if you just walked out on stage and said, you know what, I have a story to tell, and I'm going to say it from my heart, and I know it's going to land for some people, and it may not land for other people. And people tell me all the time, oh my God, that would be so great. And I'm like, okay, what's stopping you? Who is stopping you? Who can you point to a person? Can you say a name of somebody who is stopping you from letting that fear go? And what they often realize is they realize that's the story that I keep telling myself, is that I'm afraid of making a mistake. I'm afraid of failing, because it goes back to that belief when we're kids, that if we make a mistake or we get a bad grade or whatever it might be, that we're bad people, or that we're not worthy of love. And that's the story people keep telling themselves. What is a story that you've heard in your experience that often holds people back in that same situation? The story they tell themselves. I've
had a couple guests on my show, because we're up to 970 episodes, I think, now. So I've had a chance to meet lots of cool people. And and thank you for being a guest on there. And I remember a couple guest stories stand out around this. One was talking about every time she went into a clothing store, even though she's now a successful entrepreneur making good money and can afford a lot of clothes, she would instinctively gravitate towards the sales rack, because as a kid, her mother didn't have a lot of money, and that's where they would have to go. Another one, he had a 6-figure launch, very successful launch by any measure, and he needed to buy a new tools or toolbox, and he saw one at the Home Depot that was a couple $100 for this toolbox with all the tools inside, and he was beating himself up. Should I buy it? Should I not? And then he's like, well, wait a minute. I just made 6 figures, and I'm worried about a couple $100 for tools that I need. And then there was one other one who, again, she's a successful person, who said even though she's doing well now, instinctively she keeps her heat down and puts on an extra pair of socks and a sweater instead of turning the heat up, because as a kid, her family's power was always getting cut off by the electric company with it. So that's amazing that in all of these cases, it was many decades later, and stuff from earlier in their lives were still having an impact today.
It's true. And what you're talking about, and thank you for sharing that, is that scarcity mindset. That was the biggest thing that my coach back in 2019, I still work with her periodically, but back in 2019, her biggest thing for me was, she goes, you live in fucking scarcity, dude. She goes, you make 6 figures in your day job. You've been coaching now for, at that point, 2019, I don't know, 17 years. And she's like, you're still looking for the evidence. You're still looking for the proof, but you're living in that scarcity mindset. And she's like, what is it going to take for you to live in an abundance? And so what we did is we identified a couple of different areas where I had that scarcity mindset, because as you know, I was homeless at the age of 13. I dropped out of the 7th grade, went on this fantastic journey voyage. And I'm happy to say that this thing, my memoir, I think you've known, I've been writing it since 2020. I promised it to the editor finally by May 10th, which is the anniversary of the date I became homeless in 1982. But I was constantly fearful of becoming homeless again. And she's asking me, she goes, what evidence do you have that that's going to happen again? And I said, I really don't have any evidence. I said, but I feel that being in that scarcity mindset, being frugal, watching those things helps me from going back to that situation. She goes, is it also potentially being a roadblock for more abundance in your life? And I said, never looked at it that way. Okay. And she goes, what are 5 activities? What are 5 actions that you could start to take that will allow you not to have that scarcity mindset? And it's funny you mentioned about the heat. I have always been super frugal with the air conditioning, because the air conditioning, when we turn on the air conditioning in the house, here we have a 2-story house, and it's like, okay, I have to wait until it's 82 degrees upstairs to turn it on. And I said, you know what? She goes, what's something you would love to spend money on that you don't? And I said, I would love to run the air conditioner and keep my house at 68 degrees all the time. And she goes, do it. And it was so uncomfortable, Mark. It was so uncomfortable. And there was a couple other things that I did. And I just started spending with the belief that the money was going to be there. She goes, money is just energy, Chris. She goes, that's what it is. She goes, if you're focusing and you're worried about not having enough, like I said at the top of the show, that reticular activation system, you're going to find ways, and it's going to show, oh, there's the pool heater. Oh, that happened. But if you sit there and understand that it's going to continue to flow in, and then if you're not so frugal with it and you're not so obsessed with it, then it's not going to be a constraint for you to get more. And that, honestly, dude, that scarcity mindset, I didn't realize how badly it was inhibiting my growth, how badly it was inhibiting everything else. Once I started turning the air conditioning on, once I started buying premium gas, once I started, I can't remember the other thing. There were simple little things that really didn't add up to a whole lot. I think my energy bill in the summertime went up like $150. The coaching, the money that I was getting for coaching, I was able to raise my prices. I was in more demand than I'd ever been before. Back in those days, there was more speaking opportunities, got more raises at work. And so it was pretty crazy how I was able to shift that mindset and change that belief about myself to no longer shoot myself in the foot.
Yeah. I worked with someone years ago. He was a real estate agent with the company I started with. And I always remember he told me that he didn't buy lottery tickets. And the whole reason that he didn't buy them is that he felt like he was telling his subconscious that he was like relying on a big jackpot with the lottery, and somehow he couldn't do it himself. And that's not to judge people. I bought lottery tickets. Probably 99% of people have, but it was one of his things. No, I won't buy a lottery ticket, because then it's telling the universe or whoever that I'm not able to do it myself, and I just won't do it.
Oh, I love to buy. I love to, when I go to places that I'm never going to go to again, I love getting a couple of scratchers, and I love getting my son involved, and we do the what if game. Like, oh, what if we, where would you want to live, or what? And just the fantasy of it. And half the time we win $2 or $5, or I think the most I've ever won on the lottery ticket was like $500.
Yeah. Well, but it's just true story. But my grandparents won the lottery back in the late 70s, I believe. And now it wasn't the big Powerball ones. It was like $20,000 Canadian here with Atlantic Lotto or whatever, to show how things have changed back then. With 20,000, they were able to get a new car, I think a Crown Victoria. They got all new windows for their house, a new garage door, and they're able to give some money to my dad and his brother, my uncle, on 20,000. But the other thing too, it's what you mentioned reminds me of my son. We just joined a fantasy baseball league recently where the season started. I'm a big baseball fan. He's getting in. He's more basketball, but he's starting to get into baseball more. And that was the most fun that we had, picking our team together and doing the draft online, and everything else was a couple hours in an afternoon. But now every day I'm texting him, hey, did you see our team? See how we did last night? We're making trades. We're doing all this stuff. I'm like, it's a job, a GM of a baseball team, him and I doing it. But yeah, that's what reminded me of when you mentioned about you and your son doing the lottery tickets. I think it's fun to have activities with your kids.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to dream. You got to dream. And I realized, just being honest here on the show, I was realizing the other day, it was a couple of weeks ago, I was at the gym, and for whatever reason, I was thinking about, I've done some research on AI. We talked about that a little bit. The stuff in Iran, everything. I don't watch the news or follow politics, but I get my bits and pieces and everything. And I was at the gym, and I felt like I was going to burst into tears. And I'm an emotional person anyway. I'm very transparent about that, but I felt like I was going to burst into tears. And I immediately go into coach mode for myself, and I try to get to the root of what was causing that pain or that fear or whatever it might be. And for the first time in my life since I had been homeless, I realized I didn't have hope. And it was a pretty scary prospect to sit there and think, what do we do in life if we don't have hope, and if we don't have dreams, and we don't have those fun games that we play with ourselves, and the what ifs and the things that inspire us, to go that extra mile. Like, okay, that dream seems a little preposterous, but what is one thing that we can do? We could start a side hustle. Like, what are we really good at? I've helped so many people start side hustles they didn't think was going to go anywhere, and boom, they became, multi-thousands, I don't know about millions, but multi-$1,000 in business, just from like, okay, what would it take to make that dream a reality? But so oftentimes, and I get people telling me this, I'm sure you do too, Chris, I know what to do, I just don't do it. I know I need to lose weight. I know I need to take better care of my teeth. I know I need to focus on my relationship. I know I need to do better at my job. I know I need to brush up my resume. I know I need to be on social media. Why is it that in this age of information and our cell phones, and I literally tell people, like, you have no fucking excuse. You have a computer in your pocket. You have answers to anything you could possibly ask. You can use chat. I'm a fan of chat now. You have all the resources in the world to be able to find out how to pay down your bills, or how to learn about the financial stock market, or how to improve your relationships, how to be a better community. Everything's there, but people just don't do it. Why do you think that is?
Well, ironically, I think a big part of it is that computer in their pockets, because back in the day, you didn't have all this distraction. I kind of long for the days when I didn't know what the Strait of Hormuz was, or where it was.
I had to Google it.
And if you look back hundreds of years ago, and probably not even hundreds of years ago, you could probably go back 50 years. But back in the day, when people lived in villages and stuff, they weren't getting bombarded by wars going on in other parts of the world, because there was no media or anything that was scaring the crap out of them. They had their village. They would go out and fish for the day, hunt. They would be with their family. They would have a very small circle of friends, and probably a much higher attention span. The common stat, and I believe it's probably less now, but you've always heard the human's attention span is less than goldfish now. And I used to hear 7 seconds. I think it's significantly lower. Yeah, 8 seconds with it. So one thing, it's funny, I happen to have it just on my desk. I wasn't planning to mention it. This is a little device called, and I'm not an affiliate, by the way. It's not an infomercial, but it's called the Brick. And what it does is you identify the apps on your iPhone or your smartphone that are distracting you. So for me, it could be Facebook, Instagram, email, and then a handful of other offenders. And what you could do is you can brick your phone up. You just literally hold it up against a brick, and those apps are grayed out. You can't click on them at all until you unbrick your phone. And then this goes out. I keep mine usually on my fridge. Now, some people might say, well, whoop-de-doo, like it's on your fridge, so you can go unbrick your phone. It's having to get up and walk out to the fridge, hold the phone against there and stuff. It's a pattern interrupt, and it's much harder for me to get sucked into doom scrolling because I have to do that to unbrick it. Now, if you go out to a restaurant, stuff like that, and you're really freaked out, well, gee, what if I need to use this app and that app? You could bring the physical brick and just throw it in your glove compartment or something for emergency. But this has cut my screen time down significantly, and it's like, I think $50 or something for the thing there. So I do think that's what's holding a lot of people back, is they're getting bombarded by way too many things coming at them, distracted. They get work on something, oh bang, they see this. No wonder people aren't getting anything done. It's so difficult for productivity. I'd recommend people check out Cal Newport. He has some good books on productivity and stuff with it. But yeah, it's that darn device in our pockets. It's just killing things.
And I love that you brought that up, because distraction. And I talk about people. I'm like, what business are you in? For the people that I help with their businesses, and what business are you in? I'm like, oh, I'm in the business of medicine. I'm in the business of providing widgets. I'm in the whatever business. I'm like, no, you're in the business of getting and keeping someone's attention. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that. I used to be a huge fan of his. Now I just digest his content every once in a while, but he's a big proponent, like attention. Like you just said, it used to be 7-8 seconds, whatever it might be. And now it's less than 3 seconds. And I know when I'm intentional with my TikTok videos or my YouTube videos or whatever it might be, in those first 3 seconds to grab somebody's attention, I do notice that the retention rate is much better. But also at the same time, we can sit there and take a look and take that responsibility like you did and go, you know what is draining my productivity? Where do I get the shiny object syndrome? And I personally have ADHD on crack. I've been diagnosed with it tons of times in my life. So I know people sit there, and I had somebody the other day sit there and say, oh, you definitely must be on medication. They know me a little bit now. And I said, no, I actually don't take any medication. I said, I tried it. I gave it a shot. It didn't work for me. I said, now I'm just very disciplined. I've decided that, okay, what are my distractions? What are the common things that get me to get in my own way? And that's one of the things. I wear an Apple Watch. And so I did myself a test, and I have a really beautiful Casio G-Shock watch. And I said, you know what? I'm just not going to wear this anymore. And for a whole week, I just took it off. It's a solar watch. And I was like, I'm going to charge it up. Guess what I didn't miss? I didn't miss all the different things. I'm like, well, I missed my workout thing and I missed my timer, but I'm like, Jesus Christ, Chris, you got that right in your pocket. It's less than fucking a foot away. If you need a timer, if you need one of those things, it's in your pocket. I've learned about the do not disturb and the privacy thing. I didn't really know much about that. But also what I did was I sat there and I took all my notifications off. So the only thing I get notified, I believe now, is text messages. And before it would be Facebook messages, and it would be all these different things. And I'm like, okay, that pops up. And then I'm like, even if I just stop and look at it, that's a distraction for my brain. And so what the theme of the conversation tonight, you and I have been talking about, is that responsibility, taking that responsibility, taking that ownership, to not be a victim, to change the language that we're using on ourselves, to be more proactive than reactive. And I love the fact that questions can really shift our situation. Like, for example, for me personally, in my toolbox, whenever I have a situation where it's self-doubt or frustration or fear about AI and the changing economies and world leaders and stuff like that, I just ask myself, what am I supposed to be learning right now? So it's all about putting myself back in control, putting myself in a power perspective to sit there and say, what am I supposed to be learning right now? Or a couple other questions that I come up with. For you, being in what you've done with 970 some odd episodes, which is amazing, what are some of your favorite questions that you love to ask yourself or love to ask your clients that helps them get the most bang for their buck by answering it honestly?
Well, a lot of what I do is with coaches or who I work with specifically. So just to put that context in there, but it's the same with anyone, if they're entrepreneurs, whatever, is I try to determine what their motivation is. And with coaches, it's interesting because I've discovered that coaches hate to admit that they like money. It's, oh, no, I want to impact 1 billion lives in the world, but I don't care about money. No. And this goes back to the subconscious stuff and beliefs about money, which we talked about, is you have to get comfortable with admitting that you like money, or you should like money, because if not, you can't stay in business. Right. So I try to find the motivation. Now, it's not always money, but sometimes I'm getting swung around to be comfortable with that, because then they can charge more and not feel bad when they're charging, and it helps with the energy there. How many coaches are great with, let's say, a webinar or a discovery call until it shifts to the pitch and they have to go into sales mode, and then they just pull back and they don't do a great job with it. Sometimes it's not money. So I had a client once who originally told me he wanted to make $10,000 a month from coaching. And I just kind of got the sense that wasn't really lighting a fire for him. At first I thought, okay, is that too low? It's not exciting him. But what I discovered, his mother was quite sick, and his whole why was to be able to make enough money to provide for her in her later years, so she would never have to worry about things. So I guess that is tied into money, because at $10,000 a month, it's going to be hard to do a ton with for his mother there. But his main motivation was his mother. The other side of it, maybe it's negative motivation. So you've probably heard of this strategy that book writing coaches use it. For example, if someone has to you have your book that's under the wire and you got it done, but it's, if you have a date that it has to be completed, say a first draft, and you haven't typed a word in, the negative motivation there before you even start writing is you set the deadline, you write a check to whichever organization you hate the most in the world. So something that makes you want to vomit. So nowadays, maybe if you hate Trump, you're writing a check to something to do with Trump, or vice versa. And then you give it to a friend and you say, hey, if I don't finish my book by whatever date, please mail this check to wherever. And that would probably light a fire under you, because you're like, oh my God, I don't want to be paying money to whichever cause I don't support. So there's another way that you could kind of play around with motivation in a unique way you might not have thought of.
It's true. I love that. And that's definitely, it's all about that leverage, the leverage that we create in our lives. I've had people come to me and not know what their why was. And I know for me, back before 2008, my why was not becoming homeless. My why was taking the pain of my story and all the different adverse situations that I experienced and using that to inspire other people. But then I was at a funeral in 2008 and I sat at the back of the church and I watched, it was for one of my coworkers who I knew, but I didn't really know. And I was watching coworker after coworker getting up there and saying what a beautiful person Ann was, Ann Britcher. And my buddy Dave Riley got up there in his gray tuxedo with the pink tie and just started blubbering. And I thought to myself, Mark, I'm like, if I died tomorrow, and this is what everybody listening and watching should do this. If I died tomorrow, who would show up and what would they say? And this was in 2008. I was already successful, very successful in speaking and coaching. I think I might have been doing my first radio show. I can't remember when that started. Actually, it was 2008, I think, 2008 to 2013. And I thought to myself, 10 or 15 people would show up with cases of Miller Genuine Draft and bottles of Jack Daniels and Motley Crue and Bon Jovi records. And I was honest with myself because I was thinking about this on my way home. And I thought they're going to show up and they're going to say all the stories of how Chris was drunk and how Chris did this and how Chris was funny and and then the postscript on that story would be, oh yeah, it was a homeless 7th grade dropout who turned his life around and changed the world. And I sat there and I thought about it, Mark, and I'm like, okay, is that really how I want my legacy to play out? And as I was driving home, I thought about it and I had no cajoling from anybody else except for the universe, I believe. And I went home and I sat down and I said, it was like 2:00 in the afternoon. I'll never forget it. In my other house. And I sat down and said, I'm going to write my eulogy. And talk about death here in the podcast. And I do that often. As I sat there and I said, I'm going to write my eulogy. And I wrote my eulogy and I literally had written it out on a piece of paper. I always keep pads of paper near me. I wrote it out and it was one page and then I set it to the side and I went to the kitchen and got a glass of water and I came back and I was going to work on something else. And I thought, well, shit, I got to read it. And so then I started reading it and I'm like, no, I got to read it out loud. And so then I started reading it out loud and I got halfway through and I started crying. And I was crying because I was like, wow, pretty incredible what I've done. And then I got to the bottom of it and it said, Christopher Rausch will have fought for what's right and what's fair. He will have risked for which that mattered. And he will have left the earth a better place for who he was and what he did. And from that point on, Mark, I had my why. That crux of that eulogy has stuck with me since 2008, almost every single day. Like I said before, I wake up and I say what I'm grateful for and I set my intentions. And one of my intentions is to use my words and my actions to make the world a better place. And God is my witness. Every single day I do that. I make people smile. I make people laugh. I talk to people. I do some sort of social media to make people think and to give people hope. And it was that point that I was able to develop my why. What are some other ways that people in all this chaos and all this overwhelm and everything that they feel like is happening, what are some other ways that people can find their true self and find that ability to find their why?
I was going to mention your eulogy story reminds me of Alfred Nobel. Have you heard that one? Where he read there was a mistake in the paper. They thought he died and they printed his obituary. And I think at the time he was known as being the creator of TNT, like explosives, which of course had killed or maimed how many people around the world. And he read it and he was horrified. He's like, is this what I'm going to be remembered for? And that's where the whole Nobel Peace Prize and Nobel Prizes came about was seeing his obituary, even though he wasn't dead, which is an interesting thing to see. So how to find your why? Any tips? I mean, it's tough because there's not one answer for everyone. Like, Christopher, here's your why. Joe, here's yours. Mary, what I would suggest is stop looking at the expectations of others. I think we're way too impacted by, well, I have to do it this way because people said it. And I hinted at it earlier. Coaches hate to say that they want to make profit and money because they think it makes them Gordon Gekko, and they always say that same is cliche response: I want to impact 1 million people. Okay, I'm not saying you don't want to impact 1 million people, but if you're not making much money, it's going to be hard to impact a lot of people because you can't really grow something that's very big with it. So just cut out the noise. Say, I don't care what anyone thinks. If no one was looking, it's just me. What would make me happiest? What really gets me going? And it's difficult to do that because we're all wearing masks. The other night I watched one of my favorite movies, Bulworth. Have you seen that one with Warren Beatty? It's a political.
Long time ago.
Yeah, that's right. Warren Beatty, Halle Berry. It's got a bunch of great actors in it. And basically the long and short of it is he's a depressed senator from your home state, from California, who is running for re-election in the 90s.
I remember that. Yeah.
And he's just burnt out because he's given the same speeches every time. He's doing these ads where we're at the doorstep of a new millennium, and he's saying that for all speeches, and he's just like, oh my God, what's this? So he decides he's going to end it all, but he can't commit suicide, or his daughter doesn't get the insurance policy. So he hires a hitman to kill him in his last weekend on the campaign trail so his daughter can get $10 million in insurance money. So he basically thinks, well, I'm going to die anyways. I might as well just speak my mind. He's at these campaign stops doing the unpolitician-like thing of just taking any spin filter off. And so he's at, a black church, and they're like, why did you forget about us after the riots? You said this, that. And he's like, because you don't donate enough money or whatever. and then he's at Hollywood thing with a bunch of big Hollywood directors. And he says like a bunch of stuff there that everyone's probably thinking, but that no politician would ever say this. And then I won't ruin it for if anyone wants to check it out. But basically, he becomes very popular because it's different for a politician. And then he tries to cancel the hit, but he can't because the hitman had a heart attack when he's talking on the phone to cancel it. And so no one knows that they canceled the hit. So anyways, but what I'd recommend is acting like Bulworth and just taking that unfiltered approach, take the mask off. Hey, what really drives me? What's my why? No BS. I don't care what other people think. This is me. You're putting yourself number one so you can put others, ironically, number one as well. But if you're playing small and you're not doing much or whatever, you're not going to be able to help many people.
It's so true. It's really about that authenticity. And I know that's a burned out word, but I know for me back in 2013, up until that point, pretty much I'd been a suit and tie speaker doing the little triangle pose. And there's videos on my YouTube channel of me wearing a suit and tie and speaking all professional and everything. And I came off stage with a multi-speaker event with some people who you would consider famous, who have written some books. They might have chicken in the wording or something like that. I don't know. But I sat there and I looked around the room and I was like, fuck, we all look the same. We all sound the same. We're all, basically hawking our wares. And then I made friends. I've always learned at speaking events, make friends with the photographer. And so I made friends with the photographer Yodi, and one of the people that was famous, which shall remain nameless, but he was running around. He goes, where are the sheets? Where are the sheets? What's going on with the sheets? How do we do? I'm like, what is it? This guy fucking looking for linens? The photographer guy leans over to me, goes, the sheets, the things out, because I didn't do an offer like that. I said, if you want to work with me, come and talk to me. But people pass out the sheets to, here's the $9.99 fucking $9.97, special. And this guy was freaking the fuck out about his sheets. And he says, the offer that he made. And I had always seen that guy in a different light. And I was just like, you know what? And then I got in this mastermind group and I thought, I don't want to be a suit and tie speaker anymore. I don't want to be polished. I just want to be who I am. I just want to speak from the heart. People may dig it. People may not dig it. Probably a lot of people won't dig it. This was back before Gary Vaynerchuk and all the people that swore, and the Mark Manson book with fuck in the title. everybody told me like, Chris, don't do it. Chris, don't do it. And I remember I did a post on LinkedIn. This is a funny story. I did a post on LinkedIn in a speakers group that I think I'm still a part of. And I said, what do you guys think about using profanity on stage? And I had never seen a post in that group have hundreds and hundreds of comments. And some people were like, it'd be refreshing. Some people, you're alienating your audience and da-da-da-da-da-da. It was this whole thing. And every once in a while, somebody would chime in like, this is the most interesting question I think it's been asked and all this other stuff. And I just made the determination, like, at the end of the day, I just want to be me. And like you said, like Warren Beatty did, like when we cut the crap and we're just authentic and we speak from the heart, some people may not get it. I've had people tell me on Facebook, like, I have to unfriend you because you use too much language. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I wish you all the best. And then I find that they never unfriend me because they still dig the content, and secretly they're okay with it. I think, I don't know, but that's a whole other story. But in 2013, that's when I started doing at that time it was called the Blue Collar Guide to Life. And I thought I was in this group and they're like, what would you wear? And I'm like, I would wear a bandana, because I always wear a bandana because I hate sweating. And so I thought, man, if I could stand on stage in front of those lights, not wear a suit and wear a t-shirt and jeans and wear my bandana and just be who I am, a rock and roller or a smart ass, and, you know, a guy that really cares about humanity, might that stick? And from that point forward, Mark, I had lost a lot of business and connections and stuff like that. But the connections that I created and the purpose that I found and the true joy of not having to worry about what I was going to say and how I was going to say it, and just knowing that I was doing it from love, connected with so many people. I mean, this podcast is in 100+ countries. Our third largest market right now is China. Like it's US, Canada, and China, and then Brazil. Like we're in like people are digging this message, and it blows my mind after 7 years. And it just reaffirms the fact, like you just said, like when we're truly like congruent with ourselves and not in a malicious way, and we're not being selfish, we're being loving, it's pretty incredible what you attract in your life, because your vibe, as they say, the vibe attracts the tribe. I want to shift gears just for a second, because I said I wanted to talk about this because I've been following you. I've been connected with you for a while, and I've watched your relationship with you and your son. And I find it so beautiful, and I find it so loving. And I know you're passionate about that. And I know for me, my son's 9, and I start doing the math, and I'm like, oh my God, in 9 years, he's going to be 18, and, you know, all these different things. And I know for me that adopting him from birth and being a dad, which I never wanted to be a dad. I didn't like kids. I thought they were too much work and all these different things. But for me, being a dad has changed so much in my life for the better. It has taken my ego away. It is providing me so much direction and so much relaxation, I guess, or surrendering of needing to make money and wanting to be this thing and this entity and all this other stuff. Talk to us about your journey of being a dad. And now that your son is 18, you know, I feel like I've known him since he was like a kid. And I remember your post like, oh, I can't wait until he's older that he gets to watch this movie and gets to watch that movie. And truth be told, I just let him watch Wolverine and Deadpool. And I was probably being overzealous, but talk to us about your growth as a person in being a dad, and what some of those shifts have been for you. Because I know a lot of people listening on this podcast are parents in varying degrees, but what's that journey been like for you?
So first off, I'll say something I'm sure you hear all the time is enjoy that time, because it goes fast. My son is graduating grade 12 in a few months, and then he's out of the nest and off to university and stuff away from home. So that just blows my mind how quick it's gone. My son, we talked about whys and motivations and stuff. He was a little over a year old when I went through that business closure. And I sometimes think, thank God he was there, because I could have gone in a really, really dark place if I didn't have that motivation. Like I wasn't able to just lay in bed all day and just shut out the world or whatever, because I had to put food on his plate and provide for him. He was still a little over a year old. So that's a very powerful motivator. Kids, before my son was born, if someone had said to me, would you take a bullet for someone? Yes, I love, my mom and parents, my grandparents and stuff like that. But that concept would have been like, what, are you crazy? And now it's just like you, I'm sure with yours too, it's a no brainer. Okay. Yeah. I'll take a bullet for him with it. So parenthood is hard to explain to people who don't have kids because they don't understand always that sort of bond that you have, or that, and this isn't to knock people who don't have kids because that's their choice or whatever, but it is a very unique thing and a very powerful motivator. So it ties into what we're talking about here. I find with my son, I have different mementos or items on my desk. I'm a big baseball fan. As I mentioned, we're doing our pool together. Devon White was my favorite player for the 1992 and 93 Blue Jays, who won the World Series back to back. So my son got me a signed baseball just recently that sits proudly on my desk of Devon White, just to, things like that. So it goes to show too that it's not all business, because I'm a workaholic. I've always struggled with that. I could easily work 24/7 and justify it, but having kids keeps you grounded, because it's kind of like you're into the Marvel movies. I guess you mentioned Deadpool and Wolverine. The new Spider-Man movie's coming out soon. And I won't geek out too much here. I have a Stan Lee figure on my desk, so I got to be careful. But the new Spider-Man movie is on the heels of with Spider-Man No Way Home, when Doctor Strange did that thing that nobody remembers Peter Parker. He's never existed. There's only a Spider-Man. So this is set, I think, 4 years after. And in this new movie, he's only Spider-Man. So there's none of the Peter Parker stuff with relationships and things grounding him. I haven't seen it yet, but it'll be interesting to see it, because if he's a crime fighter superhero 24/7, that's probably not healthy compared to, you need the Peter Parker side, the Clark Kent side, the family, the relationships as well. You can't, in our case, we can't be working 24/7.
No, it really is like that's, but another overarching theme of this conversation tonight is I always look for those things, and it's about that why. And thank you for sharing that, because I followed your story, and I've learned a lot from my clients and a lot from people, because even before I had kids, I would talk to people about being a parent, about lessons and what they've learned about themselves. I've always been super curious, as you could tell, about the human dynamic, the human condition, if you will. And it wasn't until that we had our son and adopted him, we couldn't do natural childbirth and natural conception and all that stuff. And that I really took a look at my ego, and I took a look at what I need to accomplish, and that workaholic syndrome. I'd be the first one at my job and the last one to leave. And then I had my side hustle, and then I was constantly working and constantly validating myself. And then I just realized from my friends, like you said, the time evaporates, the time goes away, and you're left with, man, I wish I could have. And I just saw somebody beautifully say that, because I asked people this, and it wasn't me asking, but they had offered it up on a TikTok video. And they said, if I could go back and my kid was in before 10 or something like that, so it was very poignant, I would just go back and watch them sleep. And I would just be there in the moment with them. And that just kind of like rung my bell, because like I said, before we went on camera, I'm coaching a lot of people right now that have lost their sense of identity, because now their kids are doing what your son is doing and going off to university. My sister-in-law, her daughter's going to France for a month, and then she's going off and she's doing her thing. And I've seen her since she was, a baby. So it's pretty incredible. But thinking that with your son in mind, and then this will be like our last question, as I know you got to run. What are your top 3 pieces of life advice that you definitely want him to carry on and carry forward in his own journey as an adult?
Well, this episode's been sponsored by Marvel. Tony Stark in Endgame had a quote where he said, no amount of money ever bought a second of time. So there's one piece of advice I would tell him. Another one would ties back to what we spoke of earlier, is not to put too much stock into the opinion of others. It's your life. We're going to die. You mentioned memento mori. So just do what you want to do. We don't have 1,000 years on this earth with it. What would be a third? I would, there's so many. I mean, here's one thing I would say is be very careful who you allow into your life, but also relationships. When love gets in the way and the brain chemicals and everything else, both men and women can be kind of stupid, right? You get a little bit love drunk. I like to think I'm a romantic at heart, but the older I get, I'm a little bit more of a realist, that you also have to be careful with your choice of partner. If you're an entrepreneur and you pick someone who values stability and someone for a 9 to 5 and doesn't want all the ups and downs, so that's going to be an issue in your marriage as time goes on. So I'd say be very careful with your friends and your romantic entanglements.
Well said, brother. Well said. Let's let people know where they can get a hold of you, continue the conversation, check out your podcast, and know about the services that you provide.
Yeah, the central hub, naturalborncoaches.com. So you can learn more about the show, check it out, and everything that I offer, how I help people. Then we have a Facebook group. There's about 30,000 coaches in it. It's called The Coaching Jungle. We always want great people in there. That's at thecoachingjungle.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Marc Mawhinney, for being here and sharing from your heart and your soul about this conversation of life that so many people need to get with the program. And I, again, encourage them to connect with you and connect with your programs, connect with your podcast. And I'm going to place you backstage, and don't go anywhere, because I'm going to close out the show and then I'm going to have a little conversation with you. But thank you once again, brother, for being here.
Thanks, Christopher.
You are welcome. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize for going a little bit over, but as you can tell, I was into this conversation deeply. I love it when I can have a vibe with a particular guest and being able to go deep on what it is that you guys and myself can continue to do and continue to focus on in our daily lives to have that 1% improvement, to be able to perhaps have a little bit less sadness, a little bit more joy, a little bit more happiness, a little bit more gratitude, a little less fear, right? There's so much going on in the world. I've done a ton of serious shows in the last 6 months, and thank you guys. I think it's been a part and parcel for the triple digit growth that I'm experiencing all across the world. So thank you again for who you are, where you are, and listening and sharing the show out. It means the absolute world to me, because it's my intention that I can use my words and my actions, as I've said many times in the show, that I can use this to bring a little bit of positivity to your life, and not fantasy or anything in that nature. I think it's good to fantasize, like we talked about, and having those dreams, but it's also great to be rooted in the reality that we have the choice. You and I, not anybody else in our life. If you're listening to other people and they're telling you what to do and who you should be and everything else, consider not doing that as much anymore. Consider trusting your intuition. I can't tell you guys how many people I have helped by just sitting there and telling them, how about just trusting your gut? Because oftentimes our initial response, we've heard this on tests, like your initial answer is 70, 80% always going to be more accurate than your second guess, because we second guess and we go back to, well, what about this? And we look at all the evidence in our life, and then I got to be practical. I got to be this. I got to be this. And I hear people all the time, I have to do this and I have to do this. I'm like, no, you get to experience life. You get to bring joy to the people that in your life that deserve it. You don't have to be encumbered by all the victims, right? I've helped people distance themselves from their own family members. I've talked about it here on the show. I let my sister go after finding her after 20 years of being estranged. I found her and I had a relationship with her for a year. And then I politely told her to go have a nice life. And I haven't seen her. We were just talking about this the other night. It's been another 20 years. Actually, it's been 21 years since I've seen her. And so it's really imperative that you take a look at the people in your life. So if we want to do a little wrap up, take a look at the 5 people in your life. Are you tolerating them? Do they bring you joy? I have to be there for this person. They don't have anybody else. Well, perhaps they need to have a hard crash in order to realize what it is that they need to do for themselves. Because if you're always going to be there for them, then what motivation do they have? Because misery loves company. I can just call Barb and I can just drain her soul. But you don't need to do that. It's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to wake up every day and sit there and say, how can I be just a little bit better? How can I be a little bit more congruent? So I encourage you, take a look at the 5 people you're around the most. Take a look at your tolerations. I have that my coaching clients do this exercise. What are you tolerating from yourself? What are you tolerating from other people? And what are you tolerating from inanimate objects? And it's pretty crazy how much you're tolerating. I know people that have tolerated the dishwasher sticking, the light switch not working, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden they're like, fuck, Chris, I'm tolerating 25 things in my life that I just figure it is just what it is. And one day I'll get to it. But when you take a look at the people you're tolerating, the shit you're tolerating from yourself and all that stuff, that weighs on you. That weighs on your ability to focus on what's positive and focus on the opportunities in life and the opportunity to be resourceful. So take a look at the things you're tolerating. Another thing to do from this conversation is take a look at your values. What do you value? There's an exercise I give my clients where it's like, I don't know, 50 to 100 values. And I tell them, you got to pick your top 5. And they pick their top 5 and they're like, man, that was hard. And then the next assignment is, okay, now you have to pick your top 3. And then you got to put them on a sticky note. I'm a big fan of sticky notes. I have 6 sticky notes in front of me. I'm a fan of repetitive information and what am I focusing on? What is going to move the needle today on my happiness? What's going to move the needle today on me being a better father? What's going to move the needle on for me to impact more people? What's going to move the needle for me to finally get the book done? Because there's been tons of excuses and things in that nature too. But when I call myself out on it, it's pretty incredible what it is you can do. And you are a powerful person. You are a powerful person. If you're listening to this and you're taking this to heart, like I said at the beginning of the show, write 3 things down. Whatever the 3 things are, whatever it might have been that Mark shared, whatever I shared. And then spend the next 7 days and focus on those and make a promise to yourself, make a commitment. Not that you're going to try, right? Fuck trying. I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to go to the gym 4 days this week. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it like my life depended on it. I'm going to do it like there's somebody that's got a gun to my kid's head. Whatever leverage you need to create for yourself. And then when you do it, you're going to realize, man, I feel so much better about myself for doing that. And all of that builds upon itself. And then you can sit there and you can future cast your life in 6 months and say, you know what? It may not be perfect, but in 6 months, I fully set the intention. I fully am creating the vision that I will have stopped tolerating a lot of bullshit in my life, that I will start acting more congruently with myself and be more honest with myself and give myself more opportunities than I do excuses. Or you can keep doing what it is that you're doing, and you can hope, wish, and pray that you get all sorts of years ahead of you to be able to do those things. But like Mark said, time is going by. I turned 57 this year. It blows my mind. I think about that more than I ever have in my life. I think, wow, 10 years, I'll be 67. Another 10 years, I'll be 77. How's my quality of life going to be? So my energy and my focus to be healthy and to make sure that I'm getting the vitamins and the nutrients that I am, and I'm going to the sauna and I'm doing red light therapy and I'm doing all these different things. That's the leverage I have in my life, because regrets suck, ladies and gentlemen. So if this episode impacted you, please do me a solid, share it out. Not only just share it on social media, but call somebody, call a friend and say, hey, you know, it's been a minute since I've talked to you. I like to catch up and see what you're doing. But I also want to tell you that there's this resource out there. It's called the Raw and Unscripted Podcast. It's this guy that's no fluffy bullshit, shoots straight from the hip, and really cares about the people that he's serving. Have them listen to this. And then perhaps you guys get together and you become accountability partners. I'm not selling my coaching. If you guys want coaching, you can do that. But you guys become accountability partners. And you sit there and say, okay, what's the promise you're going to keep for yourself this week? And then you as an accountability partner, you hold that person accountable too. Like, what are the steps that you need to do in order to achieve that? And then next week, if they haven't done it, you sit there and say, why didn't you do it? And they go, oh, I didn't have time. I didn't have that. Okay, that's bullshit. You didn't make time. You didn't create time. Like Mark said, time is something that we all get 24 hours of. And so it's up to you and what you're going to do. I highly encourage you to check out that Brick app and being able to minimize your distractions. For me, I have set segments of the week and set segments of the day where I allow myself to scroll, or I allow myself on a YouTube video, or I do research on what's going on in the world. And the rest of the time, I really make it my intention to have a fucking good time, a really good time. So I've had a good time with you guys. We'll be back here next Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, rawandunscripted.com. Go check it out, share it out. And until then, go out there and be and kick ass.